people were at Telluride a month or so ago, so this will be a little bit redundant. Okay, so what is this about? It's actually kind of focused on two really kind of technical problems. This comes from kind of discussions at Palm Desert a year ago, and we started talking about what's the next meeting and what agency and all that. So I got to thinking about this, and so I will entertain you with some old work, but comes in the form of movies, and then focus on two technical questions. But really, the technical part of the talk is really ergodic theory. So, and my argument is that as we start to think about agents, intelligent entities that take in information, build models, and take actions on the world, there are all sorts of really difficult but interesting problems in ergodic theory that come up. Can you even take statistics of these things? Very basic things. So that'll be kind of the end. I'm going to talk a little bit about notions of stationarity, but really focused on how do we understand the internal operations of these intelligent agents. And I'm going to sort of give us a view into their minds, exactly in detail, moment by moment, how they're processing information. And I want to think of those signals that we could pull out, and how do we diagnose them, and how do we infer what the information processing operations, computation, whatever you want to call it, from those basic signals. And then the second part is just going to be these agents move through genuinely complicated environments that have many different statistical components. And so the second question is, what's the induced complexity when the environment is not purely Markovian, not just a single stochastic process, but multiple of those? And I'll kind of show you a way of thinking about it very graphically. In fact, the goal of the talk is just to show you two suites of figures. That's it, because I want to give you a visual impression of this problem of ergodicity, stationarity, and this issue of multi-stationary environments and the induced complexity. So that's sort of it. You're right. I did not give this talk at SFI because we had other tasks at hand, like writing a review. So now I can get back to that. So I want to talk first about ergodic theory, adaptive information process. What do we mean? And then this notion of kind of non-ergodicity. How do we deal with multiple stochastic components? This is really work with Alex Juergens for the first part, and then some other work with non-ergodicity with Chris Ellison and Ryan James, who both gone on years ago to other fields. Okay, so movies. I promised movies. Let's see if I can pull this off. Okay, I'm just going to start playing this and then kind of give you some commentary. Okay, so what are we looking at here? Oh, it's actually playing. So this is, out of the way. Actually, some work I did, experimental work. You saw the date 2004, so a long, long time ago. And I was interested in intelligent agents. Why? Because in fact, at the Santa Fe Institute and other places, and other fields called artificial life and other things, there was a huge interest in intelligent agents and how they learned about the world. So I built this experimental system, which you can see, maybe you've got a little glimpse of little Lego Mindstorms robots there. They were hooked up to actually a rather large parallel machine. So this is, I'm just going to give you a little pictures to show that kind of what happened. So this is kind of motions. Lego Mindstorms, they have 4 bumpers. They move around, and their feedback is one of the bumpers, or both, or 3. The micro switch is close, and then they can do something based on that. So as they're taking in this data, what they're doing is looking at their history and trying to come up with, like speaking reinforcement learning policies, how they can move through the world. And there's only one thing they're supposed to do. Don't crash into things. That's it. But based on that as a cost function, what they do is they search nearby in the space of controllers that they currently have and pick that model that lets them move the furthest distance without crashing. That's it. It's a local moment-by-moment decision. And what you can show after a while, I'm just showing off all these things are complicated. When you actually do an experiment, a lot of time, a lot of expense. So I'm showing off some of the software of this rather competent systems engineer doing all this, the interface design, anyway. So robotic multi-agent development system, ROMADS. And there was this arena, and we could even change the geometry, and we would just drop a robot in there and then have it evolve under this don't crash into things, modify your current input to output mapping so that you didn't crash into things. Inputs were those 4 bumpers, each moment in time, and then the outputs were they had 2 wheels, and they could either drive them forward or backward, opposite each other, or do nothing. That's it. So that's the input-output mapping you're trying to learn. And they learned state machines. Something like causal states, but not really, because that was too hard at the time 15 years ago. Now I know how to do it better. Taking data, whatever. The upshot was just that it was a really great exercise in the dangers of theory. So I had people come into the lab down at the gatehouse there and say, well, why don't you just, Jim, you're just complaining to me about how expensive it is and all this stuff you have to write. Why don't you just build, so Zigbee, Wi-Fi, Bluetoothy stuff. Just write a program. And the answer was, I learned so much more about the challenges of agents moving in the world by building a physical robot. Why? Because the first thing I would have done is pull up my C++, and I would have written my first function that defined X and Y positions in the 2-dimensional table with floating point numbers. That's bullshit. These things don't work with floating point numbers. 32-bit or 64 bits of precision. That is a ridiculous misconstrual of how you can use the information coming in from the environment to control a system. My point is, it's really easy if you're just a code jockey to build models that are completely unrealistic. So here, they had just a few bits coming in, right? And they had to make some decision. And you can see, this is, I think, a little ways into one of these experiments. After about 10 or 15 minutes, the darn things actually learned how to move through the world. They could wall following. Oh, the little agent learns, oh, if I turn left and go forward and that bumper closes, I know I should back up, turn the other direction, and move on. And that will take me a further distance without colliding.
Does it have a model? Does it have a map of the world to start?
No, that's
Does
the
it
thing.
get one eventually?
Okay, so excellent question. That's kind of a good example of what I was just saying, why it was good we built the physical robot, because it doesn't, we didn't build in. I would have built in if I was coding it, and I only had my coding world and perfect accuracy and position, I would build in some sort of world model. This thing learns that. And how do we know that? Because during the experiments, it's learning new states, it's inferring new states. It can augment its model if that new controller helps it move further without colliding into things. And then what you can see after a while, 20, 30 minutes, these things actually take a while to learn because they're moving. You can see that, oh, this cluster of states over here that it learned and discovered, that's wall following. Oh, here, this cluster of states, it's in the middle of the table, it's not gonna hit anything, it can do anything. So you can start to infer by looking at these models, and these are not like 2 or 3 state machines. These are like 50, 100, 200 states. But you can see that there are sort of clusters of states that have a semantics of in the middle of the table, a wall on the right, a wall on the left, I'm in a corner. So you can see that that's actually learning, in that sense, the semantics of the world around it. We even tried this with different geometries, square, circular, triangular arenas.
But how is it detect? So you said its goal is to go as far as it can before it hits something, but how does it detect how far away things are? Does it have good information? Is it just visual, or is it bouncing?
It's a time series of all its,
It's just and it doesn't, and you don't tell it ahead of time. Like it learns how to interpret images.
It's allowed to modify its current input-output controller such that it moves further. So, this is just, okay, go ahead.
I have a question about the way it operates. With its sensors and actions that it's taking, an internal model.
Bumpers.
Yeah.
What do? Do I move forward, move backward? engage the little motors.
Was the way that it's coded such that it given the action, the perception, and the internal model, next model state is
Right.
uniquely determined?
No.
It can be stochastic.
Yes,
predictive.
absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely, yeah.
All right.
Yeah, it has to guess, and then amongst a distribution of guesses, it picks the one that it predicts based on past data only, that policy action will move it the furthest without minimizing the number of collisions with things. Okay, one of the interesting things with this, I've changed the geometry, okay, fine, it learns how to follow walls. Put two of these in the same arena, interesting thing. It takes them longer to learn. Why? Because now their environment is non-stationary. Before, boom, hit the wall, boom, hit the wall, okay. Now, another agent will, boom, hit something, it's gone. And that, you can kind of predict actually, example two, that how that's gonna lengthen the time to learn useful controllers. Anyway, point is, this is just me, 20 years ago thinking about what are agents? And I really felt it was important. In fact, I kind of like to get back to this now. I look at the movies. It's just so easy to make unrealistic assumptions if you just stay with pure theory realm. It's just, anyway. But you do experiments, so you understand that. But
I was gonna say, I know you don't like reinforcement learning, but I think Howland.
I agree.
Yeah, they used finite state controllers to solve complex.
This is a reaction to Sutton and Barlow. I had my group, we sat down, we went through the entire book and we threw it out the window. No, Sutton and Barlow. They would grid this up and give each little square in space a code, a reward. This is in a completely different space of models. And you can see in the models, it's actually learning the semantics of two-dimensional space. Near a wall, in the center, near the corner.
Oh wait, you threw it out the window because you think the book's bad for what it is?
The mathematical framing is not useful.
Wasn't useful for your...
Well, misleading, I would say. Absolutely misleading. I really tried
I'm
for
just
over a
baiting
year
you, but anyway.
to understand. No, that's the classic example, the grid world. And a lot of the early AI robotics in the 60s, 70s did the same damn thing. And this is just a different way of doing it. Things actually learned to move effectively through the world without me teaching it anything about space. It inferred, in a sense, permit the concept of two-dimensional space in terms of regions. Now, I had to go in and write extra model evaluation software to go into these 100-state models and cluster states and kind of figure out what's going on. That was really non-trivial analysis part, but
Especially 20 years ago.
Yeah. Anyway, all fun and games. Okay, so I. Okay.
Sorry, Jim. So even if you made a experimentally motivated simulation software based on however approximation method of the environment that you're taking, you're basically saying that all of that is bullshit.
I felt it was really misleading because I actually wrote a bunch of those models, and I just felt that it was a conceptual sandbox that misled me. Natural assumptions, of course, I'm going to define in every move function or cognition function float x comma y. This, no.
Yeah, because a lot of
These things don't have that kind of accuracy. It's a misleading paradigm. And of course, that's what you're going to do if you grow up as a computer engineer and a software engineer. That's what you're going to do. You model the physical world. Like you see a lot of current robotics does this still. Instead, this is more trying to learn from interactions with some world what the right representations are without building those in ahead of time.
Okay.
That to me is the key thing for agency, adaptive agency, I should say.
So it's not necessarily your problem with synthetic data generation. It's
No.
the underlying assumption.
No, it's the semantics that you import to setting up your problem, and that can head you off in this completely different direction. Yeah. So
you could have written a program to simulate this with
after the
different
fact,
assumptions.
I can write code that
But,
simulates
yeah.
everything you just saw. That's kind of not the
In
point.
theory, you could have saved the
the-
costs of the practice, but in practice,
No, because it was the experimental process where I was learning something about the main conceptual challenges. Is this how I was framing an adaptive agent? And I'm just saying, if I had just stayed with doing the software, purely software engineering, I could have done it. I did it. It would have conceptually misled me. I wouldn't have learned that much. verified my own prejudices. Great, right? So this, at least I learned sort of new things. But my point here is to make you think about what are these agents? They have sensors, data comes in, they have a current, whatever their internal state is, a way of contextualizing or interpreting that data, and then they can take actions, which, as I mentioned, that changes the world. They move to a different part of the arena, and that changes what the upcoming statistics are. And that's the real thing you want them to learn, to be adaptive that way. So and the full feedback, perception, action, whatever you want to call it, sensory motor loop is there. And yeah, it was, anyway, my point is really just here, just to think about, you're the little agent on the table. What's coming in? You got 4 bits, bumpers. You have motors, you can do this, and then you're gonna take action and go into the world, and then the world's gonna change because you're gonna be in a different location. That's your data. How can you learn anything from that data? Well, I just showed you, at least with this simple kind of state-based model, a loose cost function of don't crash into things, and allowing you to kind of, on the fly, adapt the number of states in their transition structure, they can actually learn. Like I said, it took maybe 10 or 15 minutes, and then darn things. Initially they come in, they're banging, you probably saw, banging in the wall, and then 15 minutes later, they're and I didn't tell them how to implement that. They start with a single state controller. Any input leads to any output motor control. In 20 minutes later, I have an 80 state or 120 state machine that moves effectively. And what's the order parameter? Distance traveled. And you can see over time, boom, there are these different innovations where they can move more quickly without colliding.
It sounds to me that you're advocating for learning, say, the physics of a situation through interacting with it as opposed to projecting.
But the question is, here's the 120 state controller. What's the physics? What physics got learned?
Mm-hmm.
And you actually have to write tools to go into state machines, cluster the states, and understand what physics, what geometry. What's the geometry of the arena?
Yeah.
Are there other active agents in the world that make the apparent effective environment non-stationary?
Mm-hmm.
Learn that from the 120 state controller that you got 20 minutes in. So I'm trying to problematize things here, just to think, how do you, what probes do you put into the Lego Mindstorms robots such that you can conclude interesting things? It learned physics.
Mm-hmm.
That was kind of the goal. Proxy here was learn to go long distances without crashing into things. Learn that there are or are not other active agents in your environment. What's the geometry? Is it a square, a circle, is it a triangle? And could you see that in the learned models? And given those models that were empirically learned by it, convince yourself that it has the semantics of that. In those 3 different questions.
Was it able to generalize from a circle to a square, from 2 agents to 3 agents?
No, it was, okay, so that, the learning algorithm is either add new states and transitions or remove them based on this, does that modification let you travel further without crashing? That was it. So generalization, I was doing the generalizing. I had the 120 state controller, and I was the one doing the clustering. Oh, this set of states over here means follow a wall.
But still, if you have somebody that knows how to follow a square, like if you put it in a circle, it wasn't learning faster than if you started randomly?
Oh, I could give it prior knowledge. That was kind of fun, yeah. But typically I started out just because, yeah, just all inputs to all outputs controller, so everything, yeah. And then would then learn these restrictions and constraints in the environment. If I turn left here, my bumper's gonna close. I'll see a micro switch close, and I should back up and go the other direction, that kind of thing. But that's me. The generalization is me at that point. I'm looking at the state controller, and that was one of the challenges. How do you? It learns something. I come back in 20 minutes later. They're moving around better than 20 minutes ago. So I kind of like the artificial field biologists. It's behaving. I can kind of see that. Convince yourself that you understand how it got there. but tracking all the data so we can see when these innovations, new states come in, suddenly the things move much more effectively. You kind of see functionality emerges in these state-based controls.
Yeah, I just want to push back on your hatred of Sutton and Bartow. So I also hate Sutton and Bartow. I really don't like that. That's not the way I like to. I don't like the textbook. At the same time, I feel like you can conceptualize this without doing the grid or anything like that.
Oh, sure.
Because you can design a reward function that captures like travel length. And
But you have to be really careful, sorry to interrupt,
yeah.
but you keep adding things in to make it work. And I wanted to start with just the flattest, the fewest assumptions.
I mean,
Yeah,
I'm
so-
just trying to say that like the mathematical formulation that you have, which would be, it would be like a finite state machine learning to solve a COM-DP, maybe by using something that sounds kind of like policy gradient, although I'm not sure, using a
Yeah,
particular
sure,
reward function.
sure.
Like, you can fit this into the behemoth
Of course, and there are other competing frameworks, sure, yes. I'd like to try this whole thing again, you know, the LLMs, yeah, so, sure, yeah. Okay, but backing up, although we may be so deep into this particular example, I can't distract myself. My point was to think about agents in real time. That's the question I've been thinking about since Palm Desert. How do we diagnose, even if we are allowed to put our probes into the agents, how do we, from that data, not projecting constraints on it, from that data, learn how the things are being effective in the world? How are they, at each moment in time, interpreting the sensory information? How are they using that, processing the information internally and using it to take actions? So it just made me think a lot about signals. So let me see if I can jump ahead a little bit, maybe just stick on this. So the main point here is that when I think about agents, this thermodynamic agent from a paper with Alec, we have different statistics, exponential work, we're getting over time as you're learning. Again, these are little thermodynamic agents and they're extracting disorganized heat energy to do work. Okay, that's a signal. From that signal, that time series, what can I learn? Other cases where, again, I'm maybe talking to someone in the back there. Dear physicist, you have been studying these really interesting complex problems by doing spatial and temporal averages that throw away this detailed moment-by-moment information. And if you want to understand at least how agents, adaptive agents work, you need a conceptual framework and probes to pull out these interesting time series. So spin systems, you can now start thinking about informational measures as you move across the spatial spin configuration. Different particular spins have different amounts of randomness, information storage with their neighbors, and so on. So I'm now thinking about time series of informational quantities. I don't get to look inside my robots and go, oh, good, bad. All I know is that the bumper closed, and that was surprising vis-a-vis my current internal model. So my picture is we have these information processes available to us as these intelligent adaptive agents move around, and I want to know from these information processes, that, and the units are bits, surprise, memory storage, correlation, how much I can understand about how they're working inside. What is their internal information process? That's the biggest question for this. This is, if I have these instruments that tell me different kinds of mutual informations, conditional entropies, and so on, from those time series, in some sense, it's the, oh, I'm surprised. I didn't predict that from my model. Oh, I predicted that. That's the view of how they're operating internally, what their information processing is. And I want to know how to interpret those time series functionally. What kind of effective computations are there? What strategy do they learn? Anyway, point is time series of information measures. So, yeah.
Okay, so I have a question. I want to ask a provocative question because
Yeah.
I feel like you put up like an actual like concrete example of the things you could calculate. I'm wondering, like, do you think there's a possibility that you could write down an information suite and it still wouldn't tell you what was going on internally?
Oh, that will certainly happen in most cases because you won't know all the observables you need. So you do have to, I mean, at least now, you know, Alex and I are at least comfortable with this full suite of exponentially growing entropies, conditional entropies, joint entropies, mutual informations, and so on, these different things.
Right.
And we now have this sort of semantic interpretation of this thing is how much information a stochastic process has produced. It's called the entropy rate. We have these other things. Oh, at each moment in time, the environment apparently generated information, but the current controller sees some of that information, throws away, sees some other parts of that created information, and stores it away, and it affects future behavior. So we have, as you know, these different kinds of informational measures.
Right.
And so the working hypothesis is that I should be able to, slightly idealized, look at some agent and measure all of those things into time series coming up, and from that, figure out what the internal information processing and computations.
Right, that's a testable hypothesis.
Yeah, and I'm almost there.
Okay.
Yeah, not quite. I got stuck on something, but anyway. Okay, so,
5 minutes.
oh, really?
Yeah.
Because that's good, because I haven't even started to talk. That's great. So, okay, yeah, well, I actually, okay, so I spent some time trying to convince you, and hopefully the robot movies are really the best thing, just that, to think about agents. I'm kind of advocating for a new tool set where we look at the signals we have are not voltages or switch close, but how the agent interprets environmental stimuli informationally. So I have different kinds of these information time series, degree of surprise, and so on, storage. Tool set that lets me analyze those things and infer what the intrinsic information processing and computation is. So that's a task. Still convinced can work on this after a year after Palm Desert, but making progress. Okay, so I won't bore you with how this is set up, because, yeah, so how do you build the tools? Let me skip ahead to the, sorry. Yeah, we're talking about these different information measures, and I won't do this. The real thing is to think about how stored information of these various colors transitions over is transformed. And so these information time series I just talked about are called information processes. And for what it's worth, you can go through all these examples. You know, if the environment looks like a fair coin, this is the surprise each moment in time, surprise, one bit each time, how much information is thrown away, how much is stored, not much. You can go through these examples. So this is the underlying calculus tools.
Sorry, these are informational measures for particular realizations
Yes, right.
of that process.
Right.
So it's no longer a.
I have boiled this all down to a really simple problem I think I have a chance of solving.
Okay.
Give me a state machine. I can go down and calculate all of these instantaneous uncertainty, low prediction, high prediction, information storage, information thrown away. Those are my time series. And then I want to sweep across here and basically do the reverse problem. This is my instrumented thing. These are my EEG signals. What are those signals? Are they actually ion concentrations? No, they're informational. The brain is doing something. I have these informational signals coming up. You know, alpha wave, beta wave, and then I want to come back and understand this. So, just to show you some of these cases, those are easy, fair coin, golden mean process, much more complicated. Some people notice. Generate all binary sequences except those with pairs of zeros, the uncertainty. Now there's information storage across time, and it gets more complicated. So this is the data I'm working with, and I want to reconstruct the mechanism. So I'll just pictures, basically you can do that. Okay, anyway, you can process. Yeah, so again, I want to move away from average quantities. You know, the rate of uncertainty is 2/3 of a bit every second. Now, I want to look actually how the agent is interpreting the sensory stimulus coming in terms of these different information measures.
So this is like going from the average second law to a detailed fluctuation theorem.
Yes.
That's trajectory,
Yes.
relates to specific trajectories.
That's why
that
you
you
have to send me your thermal time series in detail, not averaged. I've done this to him several times, I think. So.
Yeah.
All right, okay. Just to kind of finish this up with just a couple pictures. This is kind of fun. So, change of topic. How do you go from these informational time series to thinking about the internal computation of information processing, informational mechanism? Pull that out. As you saw in the movie, the other issue that came up with the robots is that when you put more robots on the table, suddenly the statistics of their environment is markedly more complex. It's much harder. So that's what I want to kind of illustrate now, the kind of complicatedness of this. So I'll just say it really quickly with some pictures. And close your eyes. This is all the explanatory stuff. Doesn't matter. So what I'm going to do here is what I call these multi-stationary processes. So here's the problem. I'll give you just a couple examples and stuff. Okay, so the motivation for this is I'm a robot moving through the world, and I see you, and I see you, and you are different stochastic processes. What's the relationship in terms of how difficult it is to learn my environment when I take both of your individual complicatednesses into account? Not just learning you, I'm learning you together. Okay. So, for example, you are the series of all ones. Don't take it personally. You are period 2, slightly more sophisticated with memory. Okay. So what's that? Sorry. Okay. Here's another way to frame this in terms of statistics. I have a bag, and there are 2 processes in the bag. At each moment in time, I grab one of these things and generate a sequence. I put that into my data. I put the model back. Grab another one. So I just do that same thing. So the data I have are realizations from these 2 processes. But my question is, how complex is the composite system, the whole collection of data? How do I do that? Well, in this case, it's pretty simple. They're actually, now when I'm taking actually the tensor product of these 2, you end up with these kind of transient states that tell me what kind of data I need to conclude. Oh, I was in this process, or I was in this process, period 1 or period 2. Well, for example, in this case, I know as soon as I see a 0, I'm in here, because this process doesn't generate that. So that's what these kind of, they're called mixed states, what these kind of meta transient states are doing. They tell me it's the decision process you're going through to decide whether you're in this process or this process that you're observing those.
Were you alternating between process A and process B?
No.
Or you were randomly sampling
Random
process
sampling,
sequence
yeah.
and then further
Yeah.
sampling from
Yeah.
It's non-ergodic.
Yeah. Yes. Well, that's exactly the point.
Yeah.
This is non-ergodicity. Okay. Golden mean. This one, no consecutive zeros, no consecutive ones. This is tensor product.
I think technically it's maybe like a direct sum rather than a tensor.
Thank you. Yes. Well. So slightly more complicated transient structure. I'm falling 0, 1, 0, 1, but I can tell I'm in this process, or I can tell I was observing this process.
Can I just raise another question? Why do I need to know that there's 2 processes in the first place?
I'll actually kind of come to that if I get to the last nice big fancy slide. But you can frame it in different ways. Right now, it's just I'm ignorant, and I'm just asking a question: am I looking at process A or process B? And I can show you, based on the structure of those things, there's some kind of interesting interaction between how the structure of this relates to the structure of this that generates this complicated decision process for me deciding which one I'm in.
Yeah, but you know ahead of time what the processes are, right?
Yeah. And here, I mean, I'm just showing you calculate these.
Right.
Okay.
So you're not that ignorant. You just don't know which one you.
Oh yeah, no. This unfolds. So I'm making simple assumptions first. Okay, here, let me get to this one. Oops. There. Okay. Just ones and a fair coin. I just actually showed you the picture. This is maybe kind of the main point, and I'll stop. What do you think? This data's coming in. At that point, you don't know which got selected. What do you have to do to decide if you're looking at this process or this process? Well, as long as I'm seeing ones, I can't tell. As soon as I see a 0, I know I'm in this process, right?
But can't you put bounds on it? You can say what the probability is.
Yeah, of course. This is all analytical, actually. I'm getting there. I'm just trying to introduce the problem to you.
But I
want you
I don't know what
to be able to infer this. There's this long backbone of seeing ones, and basically I can only conclude that I looked at process A when I see an infinite number of ones. As soon as I see a 0, I know I was here. Notice now I have a countable infinity of transient states. That's my point about the complicatedness of this decision problem. It's actually a little bit related to some stuff that Sarah and I did on multi-random processes.
But
But I got interested in kind of what's the structure behind the infinite excess entropy. So
But isn't there a threshold on how far you can go down that back one before you decide? It just,
Oh.
it's such a small chance.
exponentially decay, sure. Yeah.
Maybe
Look, this
if-
is all
if
closed
you reach
form.
the threshold, then you will collapse more quickly.
So yes. Okay.
If you're trying to do thermodynamic machine learning, if you do that,
Yeah.
there's some chance you will dissipate infinitely.
Okay.
It's a big
I
cost.
want to end on a quiz.
Yeah.
Just then. Okay. I have a bias coin, 60-40, and a bias coin, the opposite bias. Heads, tails. Okay. What's the structure?
Infinite branch tree.
Exactly right. So what's going on? Notice now, well, the recurrent part of this state machine is just these two. That's what I want to get. But notice there's this huge chain. It's like, oh, I have a preponderance of ones come down here. Oh no, it could be over here. You go back and forth.
I'm confused now. You're never gonna be able to tell which one's which, right? If they don't, like in the other example,
that's
you
and you
could,
calculate
there are
this
some
distribution.
outcomes where you can be absolutely certain, but there's no
Yeah.
outcome here you can be certain.
Right. Yes, but we'll calculate exactly those probabilities in closed form for this case. So ask a question, time to get to process state, I'll calculate that for you. Yeah.
So one thing I'm wondering about, if I'm the robot and I'm in
Yeah.
this space, but I don't see anything, right? I'm just having my thought of things.
Right.
And there's two other robots in the thing. Can I know, unless I like run into two robots at the same time at some point, can I really?
You don't even know that. All you got is switch closures.
Sorry?
All you have are switch closures. You don't even know that there's another robot out there. All you know is the statistics coming into you is now really complicated. In fact, you can show in a case of when you put two robots in, you can actually calculate how much longer it takes for them to learn how to move efficiently across the arena. That's the only kind of statistical signature you have, that your environment is now non-stationary.
Right. Okay. So you're saying this is like sort of true information for us to actually back out something like there is in fact two agents.
Yeah. On the other hand, I hope that problem strikes you as unbelievably simple. And nonetheless, we have this massive blow up in resources we need to learn about the environment. And we know how to solve this problem practically. We're dealing with multi-stationary environments all the time. I want to know how we're doing that. Right now, I'm laying out why it's complicated. So, okay. Get to my last, even process. Okay. Finite state machines, A, B. What's the decision process look like? You know, these intermediate states. Am I closer to this or that? There you go. And that is a finite approximation. Actually, all these purple transient states, there's an infinite number of those. Think back to the two bias coins. This is why these problems are hard. I just want to show you pictures. As soon as you start thinking about intelligent agents moving through the world, this is built in. Completely. Sorry. I am being passionate about this because I have been, how, there must be some way we're actually doing this. I'm just problematizing here, coming up with examples. I have some chance of getting an idea what the origin of the complicatedness is. But I don't know, we seem to be doing kind of okay in multi-stationary environments. Okay.
Oh, we have sensors that those robots don't have, right? I mean,
Yeah.
But also the problem is much more complicated, right? Like the agents we interact with, they themselves are learning and doing things, and then you have like visual mirages, and then you're like not even sure how to interpret
No, I don't like that
this
too.
sensory
We're
information.
not optimal. We usually work okay. That's why we survive.
Yeah, but those are heuristics. How do we learn that from the environment? And so, at least the way I tend to approach these problems is I start with kind of like mathematically the simplest thing I can do, but I can analyze in detail.
Yeah, and that's what happens for
And
4
then
million years, and then slowly the system
Well,
goes
but I want to
back.
understand what those transitions are. What additional information can I add so that I can solve these things so they don't seem so daunting?
There's a framing that feels relevant for me here, which would distinguish learning and inference. Like one of the things here, like you would create these belief graphs if you knew what the world is like, is that it has these components, and then you're updating your distributions over those. Then there would probably be a stage before that, which would be like learning to get to the stage of being able to do this.
Yes, those are all good. I think those are different questions. But then there is, we come to the world and we don't know what those components are. And how is it that we end up being effective? So again, this is a simple mathematical setting, but I want you to imagine now that in my bag of stochastic processes are all processes. Welcome to life. Right? So, how do you deal with this? Well, what does it look like? I'm here just making things complicated. Okay, so let's just look at this kind of multi-stationary machine that's a combination of all one-state and two-state stochastic processes. And this I can calculate out efficient algorithms, and this is what it looks like. But I changed the representation. Because here, these are all of these processes, one and two-state stochastic machines, but notice there's this scatter. So now, what before I was showing kind of blue, took a while to get down to the answer, these are red dots, these are so-called mixed states, and there's this complicated Cantor set self-similar structure that describes how difficult this decision process is to figure out which of these 17 processes I'm in. And that's just for one and two state. So mathematically, one of the questions for me is, I imagine now I have the full continuum of all state processes. I'm trying to describe mathematically what the structure of the non-ergodic theory is of this set that describes the decision process.
This is very interesting, but I want to make the point that we're 15 minutes past our original lunchtime and we have one more talk.
Okay.
So I'd like to...
We're done.
We're done, okay.
There, there's a way to measure that, and we're done. Okay, so thank you.
Thanks so
Ask
much.
too many questions.